Hey, as parents, oftentimes one of the things we wonder about, we worry about, if you're a mom or dad, is will my kids do the right thing? Will they obey when I'm not there, kind of making sure they obey, that they do the right thing? It's funny because where we're at in the book of Philippians, this letter a guy named Paul wrote to a group of people known as the Philippians, he kind of wondered the same thing, spiritually speaking. He was in a sense, a spiritual parent to these people in the church at Philippi, this church that he helped start, and a lot of the people that went there, he helped them come to an understanding, to a place of putting their faith in Jesus Christ. And he wondered in his letter, he kind of wrote and said, you know what, I want to be sure that when I'm not with you, and he wasn't when he wrote his letter, that you still follow Jesus, that you still obey, that you're living this thing out, because that's how it's meant to be. And as we're in this series, I told you we started a few weeks ago. We started on Easter Sunday, actually, and we're just walking through the book of Philippians, kind of verse by verse, and looking at everything that Paul had to say to this group of people known as the Philippians. We've been talking about this idea that the whole context of the Christian life, the theme, in fact, of this letter that Paul wrote was that no matter what is going on in life, no matter what you're going through, no matter what storms you're facing, or maybe you're on calm seas, or something in between, doesn't matter. God's plan for you is to have peace in your heart, to have joy in your countenance and how you go about life. That those things, those heart-level sort of responses to Jesus, they need to be true of us. God wants them to be true of us, and they can be true of us no matter what we're facing. That's why we called this series Peace in the Storm, because Paul, if anyone, he knew that this was possible, because he was writing these words to the Philippians, and really to us today, some 2,000 years later, while sitting in prison, potentially awaiting his own death. And he says, be at peace. Be joyful. You're okay. So that's the whole context. Be at peace, live at joy. And then he spends the rest of this letter kind of talking about, well, here's how you really live that out. Here's how you experience that. And last week, we looked at this idea that the only prerequisite for a relationship with Jesus, the only prerequisite for becoming a Christian and then continuing to live that out is humility. In other words, you just need to know you need him. Right? That, man, I need a Savior. I need to depend on God. Ultimately, life isn't about me. It's about me serving and loving others, and ultimately serving and loving God. It's not about me. I need Jesus at the center of my life. Jesus himself said, gosh, if you got that, that's all you need. It's not about checking off a bunch of boxes or making sure you get really religious before you start a relationship with God, or making sure you clean up all your messes or any of that kind of stuff. He said, no, you just got to know you need me. You need to be humble. It's the only prerequisite for Christianity. And then where we ended last week, the next section starts with this word, therefore. And whenever you see that, when you're reading the Bible, and I encourage you, man, read the Bible, right, as much as you can. Whenever you read that, you know, oh, what he's about to say connects to what he just said. So remember last week, again, what we talked about, that the only prerequisite, the only thing that we really need in our lives in order to be able to follow Jesus is a sense of humility, that it's not about me. Well, now what he says next is directly connected to that. It has to do with this whole idea of, well, do you still follow when I'm not there? Let's look at it. It's in chapter 2, starting in verse 12. Paul says, therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, right? In the past, man, you have been in this thing. You became a Christian, and you're all in, and we've talked about this, and I've taught you, and we've worshiped together, and on and on and on. Not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence. Continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. That's not earn your salvation. That's continue to experience the blessings of it. That's continue to live it out when we're not all together, right? Fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. Paul's talking to people who've put their faith in Jesus or are looking into following Jesus. And he's saying, if that is you, if that's you, you need to make sure you're living this Christian thing out when I'm not there, or maybe in a broader sense, when you're not together in church, when you're not all together on a Sunday, that throughout the rest of your days and the other environments, you are living this stuff out. Now, for those of you here today, if you're not a follower of Jesus, we're totally glad you're here. I'm so glad that you're checking things out, and even if you got drugged here on Mother's Day, whatever the case may be, it's okay. We're just glad you're here. This is really good for you to know too. Because Paul's going to tell us, man, this is really what your faith is about. This is what Christianity is about. If you're going to sign up for this thing, if you're really going to get into it, don't believe what you saw on culture or what you heard on TV once or this or that. No, I'm going to tell you, this is really what it is all about. But he's saying, for those of you who've put your faith in me, or put your faith in Jesus, for those of you who are followers of his, you need to continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. In other words, live it out day by day, for all of your days. For it is God who works in you to will and to act to fulfill his good purpose. Here's what I think Paul is essentially saying here. It is really good for us to hear this and talk about this while sitting in church on a Sunday morning. See, our Christianity isn't defined, or it is defined, by who we are and what we do when we're not, don't miss this, when we're not all together on Sundays. If you're a Christian, if you want to follow Jesus, that is proven, that is shown, not by coming to church on a Sunday, not by hanging out with other people going in the same direction and doing the church thing. That's really important. We'll get to that in a moment too. It's critical. But that's not what makes us followers of Jesus. It's what we do the rest of the week that really makes us followers of Jesus. That's what our faith, our Christianity is defined by, who we are and what we do when we're not all together on Sundays. Think about it in terms of parenting. Again, very apropos, Mother's Day, right? Paul, in a sense, was a spiritual parent to the Philippians. And what do you want? If you're a parent, what is the ultimate goal of your parenting? I think a good parent knows that the ultimate win, the ultimate point with all this parenting thing is not in terms of the wins and losses on a day-to-day basis. How many of us know as parents, if you measure the success of your parenting based on the ups and downs of everyday life, oh boy, that's a recipe for depression, right? That's a kick between the legs. You can't do it because it's a roller coaster, and man, things go wrong, and maybe there's a triumph here, but then it all falls apart again here, and on and on. You can't measure the success of your parenting that way. The right type of view when it comes to parenting our children is, what is my kid going to be like 10, 15, 20 years from now? What am I doing today that's going to help set them up for success and health, and ultimately, we believe, a relationship with God when they're adults? That's the point. That's what it's all about. Preparing them to live well when they're no longer with you. Preparing them to obey God and live his way when you're not looking over their shoulder anymore. Investing in them and helping them to learn to do the right thing when you're not there to see them anymore do or do not do the right thing. Same thing is true when it comes to the idea of faith. In fact, as a pastor, one of the things you hear a lot, and you talk to people, and I ask this question a lot, well, why, you say you're a Christian, well, why are you a Christian? Well, because I go to church on Sundays. Or I go to the right church on Sundays. Oh, right? We have the right type of music. We do the right type of programs. No, I'm a Christian. Again, church is vitally important. We'll address that. But Paul's trying to get his people to understand, when I'm not there, he was their pastor, right? He's the one that started. When I'm not there, most of the time I'm not going to be there. Most of your life, your pastor in your local church isn't going to be there, and you're not going to be doing church together. That's one small bit of your week. Working out your salvation, living for Jesus, well, that's what goes on when we're not all together. That's what defines your faith. There was a Christian singer, he was kind of big in the 70s and early 80s. He died tragically in a plane wreck. I think he was like 32. It was in like 1982, 1981. A guy named Keith Green. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. Someone introduced me to his music when I was a new follower of Jesus. And he had an afro like out to here and wore all the 70s stuff. He's just kind of had that whole 70s look. But I'd listened to his music, and man, it was really moving to me. And then I got my hands on this, an audio recording of a concert that he actually did in the Seattle area back like in the late 70s. And in a lot of his concerts, he talked just as much, if not more, than he actually sang his music, because he was just that type of guy. And I'll never forget, I got this audio tape, and this one thing he said in this particular concert that just always stuck with me. It made such an impression on me. He said, you're no more a Christian by going to church than you're a hamburger by going to McDonald's. I mean, that was just, it just stuck with me, right? Yeah, oh, wow. Church is important. It's critical. But that's not what defines our faith. And Paul wants these people in Philippi, the new follower of Jesus, to understand your faith, your Christianity is defined by who you are and what you do when we're not all together, when we're not doing the church thing. And then he gives like a command or an encouragement, an admonition, whatever you want to call it, where he says, here's a do or a don't for you, right? Here's some of the rules of the Bible kind of thing. The very first one that he says, after he states that, after he makes this big point, right? Work out your salvation in my absence. is this. I think this is amazing. I mean, he could have said anything. And he says, do everything without grumbling or arguing. He could have said, hey, don't smoke. Don't, whatever. Don't watch bad movies. Don't do this. Don't do that. I mean, whatever rule we could come up with, right? He says, okay, here's the thing. Work out your salvation. Live for Jesus the rest of the week. That's where it's most important. In your workplace, in your neighborhoods, in your family, and all the different environments that you're at. And the first thing he says, do everything without grumbling or arguing. Don't go, if you want to really work out your salvation and live for Jesus, right, the rest of the time when we're not all together on Sundays, don't complain, don't whine, don't fight, don't bicker. Be humble, treat each other well. Think of other people, give people the benefit of the doubt. On and on and on. Do everything without grumbling or arguing. And here he gives the reason. And guys, this is so powerful and beautiful and just amazing to think about, so that you may become blameless and pure. Quote, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. He's quoting the Old Testament there. That's how God would refer to the Israelites and being God's chosen people in a crooked and warped generation in the world that they found themselves in. So that you will be children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. It's not a message of perfection. He's saying you need to live humbly, live a life of love and service. Don't complain, don't whine, don't argue, put others first, on and on. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky. Them meaning others who don't know God's love and grace. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. And then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor in vain. In other words, when I see you living that way, when that's what happens with people who call themselves Christians, when they shine brightly in a dark world, I'll know that all my effort, all this preaching, all this ministry stuff was worth it. It was worth it. It's not worth it if I just have people in seats in my church on Sunday, Paul says. That doesn't make it worth it. Doesn't make it worth it. I got a big old budget, right? Oh, we can do so many things because we're such an affluent group and we give so much. And that's for him. That doesn't make it worth it. Oh, we're just we're this or we're that or the other. It's not about the church on Sundays. What makes all Paul's efforts as a pastor, as a missionary, worth it is to see people who've put their faith in Jesus shine brightly when they're all not together in church. See, when it comes to faith and it comes to church, here is the goal of Monday through Saturday. The days that we typically don't think are really what our Christianity is all about, but this is actually the goal of Monday through Saturday, is to shine brightly in a dark world. That's working out your salvation. That's continuing to follow Jesus, continuing to obey and do the right things when we're not all together. To shine brightly in a dark world. And guys, I think this is what the goal, therefore, of Sunday is. And this is why I said church is critical. It is absolutely, for followers of Jesus or people looking into following Jesus or trying to understand who God is absolutely critical that we come together on Sundays and have church. But it's not because that defines our faith. It's not because that what proves we're Christians. The goal of Sunday is to be reminded that you and I were created to shine. Because we need reminders, don't we? Life's tough. The work week's hard. Things come at you. You have problems with your kids. On and on, so many things that can take your attention away from, wow, I am here to shine brightly for God, because we can get down, we can get frustrated, we can get things. We come together on Sunday and remind each other through music, through messages, through videos, through children's ministry, through serving one another, through having coffee together, through catching up with one another, that we were created to shine. We were created to shine. Yeah, we get to shine for an hour with each other, but God's real purpose in it is that we'd go out into the world and shine in the darkness. And then Paul ends this section of the letter by saying this, but even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and rejoice with all of you. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me. In other words, here's the thing, if we're really doing this, if we're really understanding and living out what God said this whole Christianity thing is all about, shining brightly Monday through Saturday, loving others, serving others, blessing others, being peacemakers and not conflict makers. Right? If we're doing the stuff that God has called us to do, equipped us to do, guess what? We can rejoice. that peace and that joy that every human being ultimately is searching for in life, peace in the storm, that comes when we work out our salvation with fear and trembling Monday through Saturday. That comes when our Christianity is defined by who we are and what we do when we're not all together on Sundays. And then we have peace. Then we have joy because we're shining brightly. We're doing what God created us to do. If you and I don't understand God's ultimate purpose for us in life, what we're really here for, peace and joy are really elusive, aren't they? Because we're chasing after this or this or this, or maybe this will finally do it for me or this. And all the while, Paul and I think really God himself is saying, no. Your Christianity isn't about Sundays. That's critical. That's the catalyst, man. That's where you come and be reminded. But oh my goodness, you were meant to shine the rest of the week and in every environment, and that's when peace and joy flood your heart.